The brush tool and the blob brush tool will both let you draw brush strokes on the page. The main difference between the two is that the brush tool does strokes, and it really doesn't do anything with fills. The blob brush tool will create brush strokes and fills, but it has some idiosyncrasies, and we'll take a look at those when we get there. Now, I just have a plain old blank document open. It's CMYK, but it doesn't matter what the color scheme is. Let's just start with the regular old brush tool. It's a little easier. So over here in the toolbox, I'll get the brush tool. And you see right now I just have the plain old default black stroke and white fill. Let's just get rid of that fill. We'll deal with fills later. And as far as the stroke is concerned, I can choose a color here, or maybe from the swatches panel. I'll just do maybe green. I think that'll be easy to see. Or of course you could choose them up here at the top. And you see by default the stroke is 1 point and plain uniform thickness here, and I'll just kind of do something like that. And you see it smooths out a little bit. Let me make it a little thicker, maybe 6 points here. And you see there's a big difference. Now you can control how much or how little this smooths out. Double click the brush tool, and you see you can make it a little more smooth. You could also decide how much fidelity there is between your hand motion and what you actually see drawing. Now, fill new brush strokes, you probably want to leave that deselected. We could apply fill later on. That's why I just left this blank anyway. So let's just OK that. And now I'll draw another curve, maybe a little bit more raggedy. And you see it really smooths it out, even though I was being kind of ragged. Now, it might look to you like this is being filled, but it's really not. Let's take a look at outline view. You could either press Control-Y or Command-Y on the Mac, or go up here to the View menu and go to Outline. And you see these are all just thin lines. So that's what Illustrator is creating, just thin lines. There's no fill there. I'll just go back into Preview mode. Again, Control-Y or Command-Y on the Mac. Now what happens if maybe you cross the paths? I'll just draw another brush stroke here, maybe another brush stroke here. Might look like it's filled, and if you go into Outline View, it might look like it, but I'll get the regular selection tool, and you see these are just individual shapes. If you want to join them, you can use the Pathfinder palette or maybe the Shape Builder tool. We haven't talked about either of those yet, but you can see that these are simply not connected. Okay, so let's take a look at fill. I'll get the paintbrush tool back again, and you see we have no fill, and you already saw the option not to fill anything. So let me just do something like that. I'll just leave it alone. I'll get the selection tool, I'll select it. Now I'll give it a fill. I'll just go up here and I'll choose some color, and you see what happens. It just fills it, just like you had an object maybe drawn with the pen tool or the pencil tool. And you don't have to use this plain old boring flat brush. I'm just going to select everything, delete it, press Control-A or Command-A on the Mac and delete. And I'll get the brush tool back again, and up here, instead of just this plain old boring one, we have some alternatives here. I'll just take that one, this kind of charcoal-y looking thing, and also let me turn fill off. So I have the same color there, and now when I draw, I have more of a charcoal effect. Notice that it set it back to 1 point. So let's make this a little thicker. And now I'll draw, and now you see it becomes a little thicker. There are other brushes also. If you take a look over here on the right side of the screen where your panels are, this little thing here is the brushes panel. If you don't see the brushes panel, you could get it from the window menu. Stretch it out here, and you see the same things. But take a look here in the lower left corner, the Libraries button, and you have all kinds of other interesting brushes. I'll choose Artistic and maybe Chalk and Charcoal Pencil. Those are always kind of popular. And let's say I'll choose maybe this one, this Chalk Scribble. And now I'll draw something with it, and we get that scribble. And you can always change the thickness as well. Some of these brushes have built-in sizes, but of course you can always change them. And these are just different types of charcoal brush strokes. And of course you can select one of them, and then even after you've drawn them, you can change the thickness right there. So don't feel that you're stuck with it. Okay, now let's take a look at the Blob brush tool. So I'm just going to, again, select everything, Control A or Command A on the Mac, and delete, and I'll get the Blob brush tool. I said before that the Blob brush tool will give you fills as well as strokes, but one of the idiosyncrasies is that you have to apply the fill after you draw it, even if you have a fill active. So let's do this. Maybe I'll just leave the stroke as green, and I'll get a fill of maybe a dark blue. So you can see we have both of these. And I'll set the weight to maybe 5 points. And watch what happens. I'll draw a brush stroke, and look what happens. It turns the fill color into what was the stroke color, and the stroke color it just removes. Now, I'm not sure if this is a bug or a feature, but it's been this way for a couple of versions. Now, if on your screen the stroke is still selected, you might not have Keep Selected checked in the Blob Brush Tools options. Now, if that's the case, just double-click the tool to get back to those options and select it. Or if you just switch to the Selection tool and select the line, it will pop over to be a fill instead of a stroke. So now I can apply a stroke to it. So you see we already have that green fill, and I'll go up here, and let's say now I'll make a blue stroke, but it's very thin. So I could go up here into stroke weight, and maybe I'll make it 4. So now you can see, let me just get the selection tool so you can see what's happening. Here's also how this is different from the brush tool. When we were drawing with the regular brush tool and went into outline view, you saw it was just a thin line. Let's go into outline view now. Again, Control Y or Command Y on the Mac, or I'll go up to the view menu. And now you see we actually have some thickness. There's a dimension to it. Let's go back into regular preview mode. Also, you remember when we took the regular brush and we crossed it, we just had a bunch of disconnected lines. Here's where things get really cool. Let's get the Blob brush tool back. Now I'm just going to draw another curve here, and when I intersect it a few times, let me get the regular selection tool here. It looks kind of like what happened with the plain old brush tool. But look what's happening. It looks like they're connected, and when we go into outline mode, you can see it really is. It's as though Illustrator went into the Pathfinder panel or the Shape Builder tool and it joined the lines for us. Let's go back into regular preview mode. What's even better is that the Blob brush tool is pressure sensitive. Again, I'm just going to select all and delete. And I'm going to go and double click on the tool itself to get the preferences here, and we have the same fidelity and smoothness. Maybe I'll boost up the smoothness here a little bit. Now we can also set the size, angle, and roundness, so you can manually go and make some changes here. Notice when you make changes here, some of that's going to change, or if I tilt it, I'm tilting the angle. But you see we have these little drop downs, and these are all set to fixed. Click these and you have a number of other options. Now, right now I'm using a pressure-sensitive tablet. It's a bamboo tablet made by Wacom. And I'm going to set all of these to pressure. Now, roundness, in my case, isn't going to help because my tablet doesn't actually do with roundness. If yours does, feel free to set to pressure. If it doesn't, it's just going to treat it as fixed anyway. So what's happening here is you can have an initial size. Maybe I'll boost this up here a little bit. And over here, you can vary how much plus or minus off that original size the size is going to be. Or over here, you can change the angle, and this will vary how much off the original angle it's going to be. So you can set these however you like. And notice as you drag these back and forth, the sample there changes. So let me click OK. And now with my tablet, I'm going to do something like this. I'll start off with low pressure and go into high pressure. I'll just Control-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on the Mac to deselect that. Or I can do the reverse, which usually works a little bit better. I'll press down hard. Notice as I'm pressing, it's getting bigger until it reaches that limit. And now as I draw and gradually release the pressure, again, let's deselect that. You see we can modify the width. This way I could get some very natural looking brush strokes simply by changing how hard or how light I'm pressing, I'll deselect that, how light or how hard I'm pressing down on the pressure sensitive pen. Now I already have these special brushes here, and let's use them, but it's not going to work quite the way you think it's going to work. I'll just choose one of these. Maybe I'll come up here and I'll choose this one here, this charcoal. And now I'll brush. Doesn't look any different. The reason is you have to draw the brush stroke first and then apply the brush itself. And that's just kind of an idiosyncrasy here of the Blob brush tool. So you could get some interesting effects here. Again, I'll just Control-A to select all, or Command-A on the Mac, delete. And first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to get rid of the stroke. I'll set that to nothing, and I'll take the fill, and I'll give a fill of, let's say, red. Doesn't matter which brush I take because you know it's going to change it. And I'll just scribble something. Maybe I'll write some text. Okay, now I'll select it, Control-A or Command-A on the Mac, and I'll apply a brush stroke to it. Now, as soon as I do that here, notice what's happening. Illustrator has its own ideas of what it wants for stroke and fill. So after you apply it, or choose another one if you want, then you have to go and decide, okay, maybe I really don't want to fill after all, and you can remove it. And you get some interesting effects like that. Also, when you do that, notice that it resets up here the stroke to its own size, and it very often resets the stroke to 1 point. Now let's leave that the way it is. Again, I'll deselect. I'll press Control-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on the Mac to deselect. Let's go back here, and I'm going to choose a different color this time. And maybe I'll choose, say, a yellowish green. And again, it doesn't matter which one of these I choose. I'll make the weight. Let's start off from 4 points. I'm still in pressure sensitive. Again, I'll just put some more text down here. Give a nice little loop on the K, and you see it joins together. And now I can create some interesting effects. Maybe get the selection tool, select all of these, and apply a brush to it. Again, get rid of that stroke and have the fill, or maybe I'll keep the stroke and get rid of the fill. You can have some interesting things going on. Just keep in mind that when you change which brush you're using, Illustrator will put the stroke back to 1 point. So if you want that to be thicker, you can always change that on the fly. So I'm sure you can come up with something more interesting than what I've drawn. Go and play around with it a little bit, change the brush that you have, change the color, change the stroke width, and go to town. I think you'll have a lot of fun with it.